thank everyone. Well, now that we're recording, I want to thank everyone for being here. Today is this 22nd of Shvat, the 4th of February. And so the 22nd of Shvat is a special day in the Chabad calendar because it is the yard site of the Rebbitzin, the wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbitzin Chaya Mushka. So if you ever encountered a Chabadnik that was named Chaya Mushka, and I'm sure if you've frequented Chabad people, you may have met a Chaya Mushka once or twice. Well, that Chaya Mushka is named for the Rebbitzin. She passed away in 1988. And so at this point, I guess we're talking about 30...
How come it took so long, Matty, though?
What is it, 30 something years ago? So many of the young Chabad Rebbitzins out there across the globe in places like Iceland and Russia and Denmark and whatever, many of them are named Chaya Mushka for her. So today is her yard site. Today is also, before we start, and again, we're in my opinion, a highly fascinating, thought-provoking space in the Talmud, the Talmudic discussion. Today's learning and this week's learning will dedicate for Lili Nishmas, my mother Chassia Bas Tavia, whose yard site was yesterday, and Tema Bas Reb David Halevi, and L'schus, in the merit of the speedy healing of Moshe ben Esther, Esther Bas Simcha, and all others who are in need of a refuah of healing. Hashem should send a heavy dose of healing to the world, and hopefully the vaccines will prove to be even more effective and more protective, and everyone should be inoculated and safe from all of the medical and mental and emotional concerns that are certainly floating around. And so that is our introduction. Real fast, yesterday, in my opinion, a fascinating Gemara. We started out trying to reconcile contradictory texts in Proverbs, in the book of Mishlei, and it essentially centered around, do you respond to somebody who has a disingenuous and antagonistic comment, statement, or not? We brought a number of anecdotes, and we said essentially that when it comes to regular life matters, don't dignify every crazy comment, every offensive comment with a response. If you respond, you'll become like them, says Mishlei. However, when it comes to the realm of Torah, many times it is necessary to set the record straight, to clarify, and to put that idea into the world. We had a series of conversations between Rabbi Gamliel and a student. Rabbi Gamliel was talking about some hard to imagine miraculous scenarios in the future time when Mashiach comes. Each one of those situations, the student laughed and expressed doubt that could ever happen, and if it was even plausible or reasonable to anticipate. And in each scenario, Rabbi Gamliel responded, trying to show him that there is already some kind of precedent on this planet, and therefore they should not be as hard to imagine as he may have imagined. Again, not going into the details, but that was essentially a series of conversations, which of course led us to other kinds of antagonistic and offensive conversations. We had the allegations that were presented to Rebbe about his wife and the tragic end for that nudnik, as well as a similar story apparently recorded as having transpired with Rebbe's student, Rebbe Chia. Rebbe Chia said that the reason why Rebbe's reputation was protected in this way was by virtue of his daily prayer that he shouldn't be confronted with insolence and, I don't remember what the other word is, but basically chutzpah and people of chutzpah. Insolence and, who remembers what the other word we said was over there. But anyways, that is that story. We then went on to the most, in my opinion, famous but very interesting story, a demonstration of the humility of Hillel and the willingness to engage a nudnik who essentially only set out to antagonize and to cause Hillel to lose his cool by asking strange, odd, and offensive questions. And instead of rejecting them, he graciously encouraged those questions and responded calmly, patiently, and compassionately. Even when the guy declared that there should not be many more people like you because I lost all this money, he said, better you should lose that money than I should lose my cool. And of course, that is the story. There are many, many, many stories about Hillel, but this is one of the stories that really convey his character and is celebrated. So let's share the screen. So I said that I want to look a little bit into the dialogue and the questions. I don't want to spend too much time because there's more really interesting and cool stuff to get to. But the Ben Yehoyada makes a few comments, and the Ben Yehoyada is always fun. He says this number 400 is a number of evil. 400 is the number of fighters that Esav had, and Kabbalistically, 400 is frequently considered a number of the Satan. Whatever that means. Don't go and change your life because of this, but it's just interesting. He found this continuing parallel where 400 is associated with a less than ideal and holy proposition. He says the word ra, ayin, evil. I is the numeric value of 400, which in the Hebrew language is the letter Tuf. And 400 is a number that represents money hungry. Esav was considered hungry for possessions, and these people also were willing to sell their soul to acquire some more possessions. So that's one thing that he says that's interesting. He then comments on Hillel's patience, and even though the words the guy was using were most disrespectful and evidently not interested in having a pleasant dialogue, Hillel overcompensates. He right away calls him Bini, my son. And as you may know, sometimes the way to overcome an antagonistic person is to shower them with love. Many times a person's coming from a complicated or broken place, and the only language they know, or they are only comfortable expressing themselves, and that's this way. And so Hillel, in a sense, is neutralizing, overcoming, or trying to anyways, that with his graciousness and welcome. Of course, it also was likely Hillel's character, because if this is not your character, you're probably not going to be that patient. The roundness or the misshapen heads of the Babylonians. So when Hillel says, oh, wow, that's a great question, what he was saying is like this: you intended just to ask a silly question, but in truth, I can find depth in it. Remember, the Ben Yehoyada says, your words have no Torah, and I'm a Torah person. I still take this with great weight, because I can perceive within your question an angle where it is a Torah conversation. And then the Ben Yehoyada explains that so I just want to give you a fast sneak. What does he say over here? So he says like this. Again, other interesting ideas. You don't have to take this to heart. I just want to show what he says. He says that there is a saying in the Talmud that says that Babylonia, Iraq, has a great prevalence of ayin hara, more than other places, the evil eye. And there's nothing more damaging to one's wealth than an evil eye. And he says that's only if a person doesn't make an effort to be low key and to downplay and not display their affluence. So this is the reason why this is asking about the Babylonians, because they are particularly prone to the evil eye and to having their fortunes turn negatively. And so he asked, because they don't have clever midwives, which what he was saying is we don't have clever people to provide protection by keeping their assets low key. That's his way of reading this. Interesting. And then he talks about the squinty eyes and so forth. And again, I'm not going to go through all of it, but he describes that maybe the eyes of the Talmudim are talking about weak, trying to get the right words over here, sensitive Torah scholars who can't endure the back and forth of a rigorous intellectual debate. And so they become offended or something to that effect. And he says, yeah, well, they live in a region where there are many people that are antagonistic to the Talmidei Chachamim, and therefore they're a little more sensitive even when it's in their culture itself, and on and on. But anyways, bottom line is like this. The questions were just meant to be silly. And his point was to bother and disturb Hillel on Erev Shabbos, which is typically a busy day. And yet Hillel chooses to respond and find wisdom, insight, and give rational answers to all those questions. That's the story. Now, any comments before we move on to some other famous Hillel and Shammai stories? Doctor, everyone's muted, so please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I don't know if it's something just to put on the list, but you mentioned something about the evil Ein Hara and wealth and sort of a modest tznius lifestyle. Where is that from, and what does that mean today? Because you see, quite a few well-known firm people who choose, they could afford it, to have a very elaborate lifestyle, not necessarily at the expense of doing other good things and stock and everything, but there are, so I'm not sure if that's where is that from and how far one is expected to go.
All right, so first things first, I'm going to answer briefly just because this is intriguing. I'm not an expert in Ein Hara. I'm also regretfully not an expert at managing wealth or concealing wealth. Hashem hasn't given me that challenge yet. But it's an interesting point. And I think, I don't know because there is apparently within Judaism a virtue of modesty. And modesty doesn't only mean covering one's body. There is such a virtue of not being flashy and ostentatious about one's financial circumstances. But yet we find many people who are blessed with fortune, and they do flaunt it. And Baruch Hashem, it seems like Hashem continues to bless them. And I'll take this moment to say Hashem should continue to bless them. And Hashem should give as much affluence as possible to Klal Yisrael and to people that, and especially Hashem should give them the insight and the sensitivity to do good things, whatever that is, with part of that blessing. But we certainly don't want to be putting any kind of degree of Ein Hara on a Jew that's doing well. Hashem should bless everyone possible. But it's everyone's choice to make. Just as far as like a defense, certain people or certain industries, their credibility is dependent on their perceived wealth. And so there are certain businesses, especially in our very superficial world today, where you make money by convincing people or displaying your wealth. And that might be a defense. Let's say a person who's hoping to get clients might want to drive a nice car. And a person who claims to be a brilliant investor in the market might need to say, hey guys, you could become fantastically wealthy. And so my Shabbos, my off-road car is a Lamborghini, and or whatever, my off day, that's what I give to my kids. That's the spare car. So maybe in certain circumstances, there's a reason to do so. I certainly am not qualified to judge but if someone would want to know what is like the Jewish ideal, well, the Jewish ideal probably says to live more like Warren Buffett than, but again, if you have it, and here's what I'll say, one last thought. There are people that Hashem blesses them with wealth and they don't feel comfortable using it. They don't feel comfortable using it for themselves, and they don't feel comfortable using it for others. And sometimes my belief is that the key to helping the person become comfortable to spend, to help out a person that's in need, or to do other kinds of productive projects, is to first experience the thrill of spending on oneself. And so sometimes I would say it's part of a process that's necessary for a person to realize how much good they could do, to first spend on themselves. And so again, not that I have many occasions to speak to people that probably fall into who we're talking about, but I have on occasion advised individuals who, especially that inherited wealth, and they were uncomfortable about it. I encourage them to spend on themselves, because once they realize it's theirs, and once they realize that they can spend it, and once they realize that there's still more, there's a good feeling about spending it for good things. So you have to first spend on yourself, realize it's yours. And sometimes that's the case, not always, but So as you can tell, I'm not qualified to tell you about the Ayin Hara. It's something that some people take into account. One last thing. The Gemara in Bracha says, the more you're worried about it, the more it could be a problem. So we should try not to be consumed with fear of Ayin Hara, because the fear, that can many times be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we should live with faith in Hashem, confidence in Hashem, but no need to make our friends or family feel uncomfortable around us, or feel like nobody's, because we're living on a different caliber.
Just one quick advice, Rabbi. You
Yes.
could make a suggestion to these people that the solution is quite simple if they're willing to change their last name to anonymous.
Then they'll see their name all over the place. No, it's not.
Okay.
But anyway, so that was the Milsa de Dichasa. So again, we shouldn't be consumed with Ayin Hara. We shouldn't let it get to us. Hashem should bless everyone with wealth. Use it gesundheit. Do good things with it. Use your influence that comes with wealth to encourage other people to do good things with their wealth. Gesundheit. And modesty is also a virtue. How's that? All right. Tana Rabbanan. We should all have these struggles. Very big struggles. We should have them. Tana Rabbanan. Our sages taught. Again, more famous segments of the Talmud, but I believe that you might find interesting. Maisa v'goy echad shaba lifnei Shammai. A Gentile approached Shammai. Amar loy, and this Gentile asked Shammai, Kama Torot yesh lachem. How many Torahs do you have? Now today, if someone would approach, me, and say, Rabbi, how many Torahs do you have? I would say, come, let's go to the ark and let's count how many Torahs we have. But Shammai understood, and probably this was the nature of the question, a little differently. Amar lo, he said, Shtayim, we have two Torahs. Torah shebechtav, the Torah shebal peh. We have the written Torah, the Torah scroll, and Tanakh as we know it, and we also have an oral Torah. Amar lo, so this Gentile who was interviewing Shammai to consider joining the Jewish faith, Amar lo, he said, Shebichtav ani mamincha. I trust your word that there is a written Torah, that I trust you about it. V'shebal peh eino mamincha, but I do not believe that there is an oral Torah. It doesn't make sense. I don't see it. If I see it, I believe it. I don't see it, I don't believe it. So what do you say if someone challenges you like that? Well, we'll see what Shammai did. By the way, just to say, of course, Shammai and Hillel are the famous pairs, dual leaders of the Jewish people. Each had a different personality style, different leadership style. Each had their own school of students. And many of the famous debates in the Talmud, the earliest debates of the Mishnah, revolve around the conversations between Shammai and Hillel, and more considerably, more significantly, the disputes between Shammai's students and Hillel's students. What did Shammai do? He gave it to him and told him to get out. He cast him out with a nizifa. Rabbi Steinsaltz here says nizifa is a reprimand. Rashi, Ditanya, Habala Kabel Divrei Chaverus, Chutz Midavar Echad. If a person wants to become a member of the Jewish people or of a more focused group of people devoted to service of Hashem, and they come with the exception of one item, or a person that comes to convert, and they want to accept the Torah minus one detail, ein mekabelin oto. So the halacha is, a person says, I want to convert, but I'm not going to fully embrace the Jewish faith, shouldn't be converted. And so Shammai accurately and correctly said, don't waste my time. Your condition is not a condition that can work, so get out of here. What did this guy do? He went to the first big rabbi. The first big rabbi sent him out. Balifnei Hillel, he then approached Hillel and said, Balifnei Hillel. He went before Hillel and did the same thing. And Gaire Hillel converted him. Rashi, how did Hillel convert him? Hillel's action is not consistent with Jewish law, because the Jewish law says don't convert somebody if they're not willing to embrace the totality, the entirety of the Jewish faith. Rashi, v'samach al chachmasai shesoifai sheyagilenu lekabel olav. Hillel was confident that he would ultimately prevail when he was giving this young man his education in Judaism, that he would ultimately accept everything. This is not a true scenario where a person is converting with the exclusion of one item. He didn't actually deny the existence of the oral Torah. He just didn't believe that it came directly from Mount Sinai. He thought it was made up by the rabbis. And Hillel was confident by the time the program, the conversion classes would conclude, he would be fully convinced. So how does Hillel convince him? So he says, come to class, I'm going to start teaching you. Yom Kama Amar Lei, the first day he told him, Aleph Beis, Gimel, Dalet. These are the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph Beis, Gimel, Dalet. I don't know if this is saying that he literally taught Aleph Beis, or if he said item A, B, C. But I think the pshat is that the interpretation here is that he literally studied with him Aleph Beis. Limachar, apichle. The next day he said, you know what makes the A sound? And he showed him a tough. You know what makes the B sound? A shin. You know what makes the G sound? The G sound? A resh. You know what makes the D sound? The dalet, a kuf. He swapped the letters around. Amar Lei, so the prospective convert, or maybe converted already, he says, yesterday you told me something different. Amar Lei, so Hillel says, are you willing to trust what I told you yesterday? I've got a lot of experience and a lot of education. You can trust me about the intricacies of the oral tradition as well. Rashi. How do you know that the aleph letter is the one that looks like an aleph and a base? I taught it to you. Let me explain, because you can read a text and see what it says in the text. But the building blocks of that text is the ABCs. And for that, there needed to be a certain degree of trust on an oral tradition, because indeed the sound of the letters is something that's conveyed orally. So he was saying, if you trust me to give you the fundamentals that will give you access to the text, well, those fundamentals that give you access to the text are also part of the oral tradition. So if you're willing to trust me on the part of the oral tradition that will give you access to this work, then you have to trust me about the entire corpus of, or I don't know if the corpus is the right word for an oral idea, but the entire oral body of Jewish teachings. And the guy was convinced. So says the story. Give me 1 second. Anyway, so basically, long story short, if you trust Hillel for some, you may as well trust him for everything. Doctor, go ahead.
My question is both with Hillel and Shammai. The story seems to suggest that one could go to a rabbi, either one of these days, and say, I want to be converted, and we'll teach you what Yiddishkeit is all about afterwards, because it says he came to him and he said, okay, I'm going to convert you. And now we'll start telling you what it's all about. And I think today it's quite, at least in my experience with conversion of people, it's quite the contrary, that the first thing is they require that you prepare for it, depending on whom you go to, whether it's a year, 2 years, or what kind of things you have to know before you then make a commitment to follow certain things, whether they're depending on the rabbi, all, some, now, later on, when you have children and when you don't have, So
you're making a fair point.
Yeah.
Briefly, here's what I would say. First of all, the text doesn't necessarily read the way you're reading it. Although when I was looking at it, you could read it 2 ways. You could look at it that Gaire and then this happened, or you could say that this is the conversation that led to the conversion to be able to take place. So Shammai said, I don't want to have a dialogue. Hillel had a dialogue, and when the guy accepted it, he converted him. So you could read the Gemara two ways, but assume it's the way you read it. I would say like this. The Rambam writes that when you convert someone, you should introduce them to the basic big ideas and the fundamentals of Judaism, convert him, and then the person continues to learn. I believe the reason why conversion today has evolved to the point where there's a much more rigorous process prior to conversion in place is for the simple reason that today it is much more comfortable and popular and reasonable to want to be a Jew for all different kinds of reasons. In the time of Maimonides, or the time of Shammai and Hillel, to be a Jew was truly not a ideal, cool situation. And you'd have to be just about certifiably nuts to want to convert. And so for that reason, I think there was a little less skepticism. If a person's coming to convert, they're essentially losing everything. They have to have a burning desire in their heart, or something has to be of great sincerity. Because Judaism believes that when a person converts, it's not a Gentile that converts, it's a person that was always really Jewish. They always had a neshama. Conversion is a really serious and important and powerful thing. And so I believe that might be part of the reason why conversion has become more rigorous, is because today there are so many, there are many other reasons why a person might want to convert that are not sincere. And if a person converts and then has a relapse, it's not a good thing for that person, and it's not a good thing for the Beis Din. And I think continuous experience is what compelled the Bati Dinim today to be a good bit more strict, to really weed out those that are sincere, those that are just having a flavor of the month kind of experience. And I can tell you from my experience, and I don't do conversions, but I field calls on a weekly basis, if not more frequently, of people wanting to convert. But a lot of times it's just, why not? Or it sounds cool, or I like the Kabbalah, or I read a story, or I want to change my identity. And some of those people can go on and really become sincere and convert, but many, many others, it's just a passing fad. And by the time the conversation finishes, they're already on to the next thing. And so I think the process today is meant to make sure that the people that are converting are sincere and really want to stay in it for the long haul. But that being said, different Bati Dinim within the Orthodox world have also different standards, and it's one of those complicated conversations. But that's some thoughts, and I think you might find that to be somewhat accurate. Anyways, that is that. Also, the other thing, just one last point, is that in those days, to become a Jew, you joined the Jewish community. You needed to figure everything out, because that was your entire world. Today, you can convert and then live on the beach and not even have this. You're not necessarily in an environment that's going to compel you to learn the rest of Judaism. You're not necessarily going to have a community that's going to usher you along. So if you don't learn it beforehand, you may never know it. And anyways, okay, those are some thoughts. Shuv Masa Begoy Echad Shabbat Lifnei Shammai. Another story of an individual who came before Shammai, Amar Loi, Gaireni Almanas. This is the famous story. Gaireni Almanas Shetil Medeni Kol HaTorah Kula Kishe'ani Oimed Al Regel Echas. Convert me while I am standing on one foot. What did he mean? Did he mean literally standing on one foot?
Quickly.
Did he mean give me a fast version?
Yeah.
He means give me a crash course.
Right.
Or some of the commentaries say what he meant is give me one mitzvah that will be the building, that will build out for me the remainder of the Torah. He was afraid that maybe because he didn't have a childhood education, it'll be harder for him to absorb all the information. So he wanted a cheat sheet. He wanted something that will be basically the basis of and the foundation for the rest of his Judaism. I'm just reading different commentaries, different ways to understand this comment. Anyways, Shammai took a measuring stick. In those days, you didn't have tape measures. You had a stick that had a certain size, and he chased them out of the building. Rabbi Steinsaltz here says that this was a common measuring stick, and Shammai was a builder by trade. That's very interesting. Rashi, Makel Shu Emes Amas Oirech. It was a stick the size of a cubit of an amma. You set up a price, build out this part of the building for this square amma edge, and so Shammai said, "Get out of here! You can't be serious." Bolifnei Hillel, he approached Hillel, Gairei, and he brought him into the conversion process. Doctor, you like how I translated that to deal with your Gairei? He let him enter the program. Amar Loi, how did he satisfy this Gentile or this prospective convert's request for Torah on one foot? We all know this. Da'aloch sinei lechabrach lo savei. That which is hateful to yourself, don't do to your friend. Zu, he, ko, haTorah, kula. This is the totality. Oh, what just happened? This is the totality of Torah. The iduch pirushahu. We're almost back at. Oh, we'll get it. And the rest is all commentary. Almost there. Here. Idach pirushahi. The rest is commentary. Zeal Gemara. Go pick up that commentary. So Hillel was a clever guy. Here, this is the Torah. Now, everything else you got to know too, but it's commentary on this first thing. And again, according to the explanation that I gave you, based on my my dear Mesifta over here, which is that he really wanted a clue. He wanted something that he could really, really engrave on his mind and heart, and from which the whole Judaism will be part of his identity. And so, this was the teaching. Don't do something hateful to your friend. Rashi. Reyacha v'reya avicha al tazoiv zeh kodesh baruch hu. Al tazoiv al dvarav she'alecha soneh she'yavar chavercha d'vercha. Rashi explains very interestingly. Rashi explains it without getting into the nitty-gritty, that what he's saying is, don't do to Hashem. Hashem is, in a way, Hashem is referred to as your father and your friend. Don't do things that are hateful to Hashem. Basically, do the Torah and the mitzvah. So that's not the common read on it, but that's how Rashi says it. Of course, commonly, we understand that the most important principle of Judaism is the interpersonal component. And if you're not going to love your fellow man, and if you're not going to be compassionate and caring and sensitive, well, then the rest of Judaism is also loses its value. To be very devout to the parts that are between Adam l'makom, between man and Hashem, and to not do the part that's been Adam l'chaveroi, makes one's Judaism not only lacking, but it's missing its entire foundation. Because you got to love. I'm sorry, just one more line, and then I want to hear from you. Because you have to realize that Hashem loves every Jew or every person that He's created, and so when we hate each other, it's like hating the child of Hashem. And you can't have a good relationship with somebody when you hate and antagonize their children. Dr. Hammer, please.
Yeah, and I think Rashi is right on target, because my initial reading of the Gemara there was that that's dishonest. In other words, we have bein Adam l'makam, bein l'chaver. So this clearly talks about how you should behave towards other people. And if that's all there is to it, then it's really not a religion per se. So that I said, wow, I got to ask that. And then when you read Rashi, it's really great, what shall I say, marketing in terms of explaining that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really a friend, and not only, so I'm just saying it's very interesting to look at it that way. I'm not sure if many people really do, but I mean, it's just very interesting to get out of that question of being dishonest about saying that's all there is. Because a lot of people who don't believe in religion, a lot of secular people will say, I'm a good person, and that's all there is. And that's what this seems to say, if you read it without.
Right. In other words, you're saying the common reading is almost like Hillel takes the religion out of Judaism.
Yeah.
he takes out the relationship with God. But Rashi's reading, and that is probably why Rashi, and I'm glad you made that additional comment. That's probably why Rashi gives this translation, because Hillel is giving a short line. Don't do something hateful to your fellow. So it could be referring to Hashem. Don't do the Averot, do the mitzvot. But it's also at the same time referring to your fellow man as well. So in a sense, now the way Rashi reads it, the single thing, don't do hateful to your fellow, incorporates the two parts of Judaism, Bein Adam Lechavero and Bein Adam Lemakom, interpersonal and between and the spiritual devotional side of the religion. And so if we dig deeper, based on the words of Rashi, Hillel's words are true and very, very meaningful and deep. And I think we may have saved or managed to significantly upgrade this teaching. Professor, please.
This is a very popular story. It's quoted in many, many, many places. And in quite many places, it's quoted lopsided. It's just quotes, don't do to another person what you don't want to be done to yourself. And this is the end of quotation. And I find this mode of quotation quite misleading, because what follows after this quotation just includes also the responsibilities towards Hashem as well. Because what Hillel says, in essence, that's the essence. But you have to go and study the rest of the Torah. Even though he calls it a commentary, but nevertheless he says, go and study this commentary. And in many discussions of this incident, this important component of the incident is omitted.
Yes.
I find another similar example of abrogated quote is about let my people go. When people quote this, when people quote it, they stop at let my people go, stressing the political and personal freedom rather than the purpose of letting people go. I know about that because as a former Soviet citizen, I've heard that slogan many times around, and in most cases, saying, let my people go. And it wasn't mentioned that the purpose of letting people go is to serve Hashem.
And Professor, just to add, there's another comment. Here, I'm hearing myself twice. There's another comment about Bilo, Beis Yaakov L'chuv and Elcha.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit, hold on, I'm just gonna hit mute all because I'm hearing my voice. But please unmute yourself. Professor, I muted you too, but I want to hear your response. But it says, Beis Yaakov L'chuv and Elcha, house of Jacob, go. Bilo, and which was the slogan for, but some of the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic leaders in Europe didn't get on board with it, and the commentary that I've heard from a number, again, this is an old conversation, it's not relevant really today, but they said they cut out the words, the Beis Yaakov L'chuv v'nelcha b'or Hashem, in the light of God. So they said, let us go, but they didn't say that. The verse is describing going in the way of Hashem. And so it loses, when you cut off part of a quotation, you're not simply missing the fullness of it, but many times you can be missing the essence of it. And so I think, Professor, the point you're making here, and I'm glad you did, is that Hillel employed again, going away from Dr. Hammer's reading for a moment. Let's say he was literally saying, the most important thing is not to do that which was hateful to your fellow person. But this was a tool to get this fellow interested in the entirety of the Torah. So in order for this statement to stand, you have to also understand that the rest is its interpretation, go study, which means you're not really going to understand this if you divorce it from Torah tradition and Torah observance. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because it does underscore the depth and the weight of this comment, and the fact that it's regretfully not always given its full context. And ironically, it's the most well-known stories that everybody knows, that it's most essential to restudy it, because many times it is missing such essential components in the way it's presented. And just to show you, going back to Dr. Hammer's interpretation, that again, the fellow is Hashem, at the very least alongside the fellow human. When he says v'idach pirushahu, what he means to say is, you might know that in order to have a healthy relationship, you just got to do whatever your lover, do things for your lover that they enjoy. But if you don't take the time to figure out what they like, that advice is useless. So the hamilsa ladas is a davar sonai. It's not enough to know that you can't do hateful things to your fellow. You got to know what it is that bothers them. And so the whole, according to the Rashi's explanation, we're talking about Hashem, you got to now go and study and know everything that Hashem wants and everything that Hashem doesn't want. And so that's again a part of this story that's left out. And so tragically, Rashi, although he's the most famous commentary in the Talmud, doesn't really get his day in the common reading of this text. And it takes a deep re-examination to see Rashi's sense on the story. Just one more second. For those that are getting itchy because we're not moving along, I hope you don't mind. I think this is an important point to figure out. All right, we'll go on. This is not the only story. This is just the most famous story. But there's now going to be another story about somebody who wishes to join the Jewish people and know about the principles of Judaism. And again, it shows us that Hillel was willing to be creative. He's willing to be out of the box, and he understands that ultimately he's willing to consider where the person is coming from. And when a person makes a request like that, Shammai thinks, oh, he's just antagonistic, or he's just trying to make light of Judaism. But Hillel seems to understand that in truth, this person just doesn't have any background and doesn't have a frame of reference to make a reasonable request. And so Hillel is willing to give him the next step and to see if the person is really sincere and interested in what he has to teach. So this is another story along the same lines. Remember, Hillel and Shammai live in the final 100 years or so of the Second Temple era. I would say around the 100 years before the temple is destroyed, after the story of Hanukkah and before the destruction of the temple. Shuv Masa B'Goy Echad, another story of a Gentile. Again, remember, to be probably a Roman or a Greek person, maybe one of there are other groups as well, living in Israel. What is it called? The Idumeans? Is that how you can pronounce it? I don't know. There's other tribes that lived around. Jews weren't necessarily on the highest rung of society. Not everybody was running to become a Jew then. Especially at this point, the Romans are just about in control culturally and militarily over Israel. There was once a Gentile walking down the street, and he passes by a study hall. V'shama kol sofer, and he hears the voice of a teacher. And I'm going to suspect he was translating. This is just speculation. But if the person who wasn't Jewish understands the language, it's possible that this teacher was translating the Torah into Greek or Latin or whatever it was. V'shama kol sofer shaya omer, and he hears the teacher say, Ve'ele habegadim asher yasu, these are the garments you shall fashion for the high priest. Choshen, a breastplate, the ephod, and the ephod, which was a kind of apron of sorts, decorative, very fancy. The verse continues: a robe, a tunic, a hat, a girdle, a belt. Amar, so he starts asking around, Halalu lumi, who gets to wear this wonderful wardrobe? Amar Lois, I tell him, you want to know who gets to wear this? The Kohen Gadol, this goes to the high priest. Amar, I said, so this person tells himself, wow, that sounds really, really neat. I would love to get a pair of this really super cool, stylish garments. Eilech, I'm going to go, Ves Gayer, and I'll convert, Bishvil Sheisumeni Kohen Gadol. I want to convert, so I too might have a chance to be a contender for the high priest. Alan, be careful. They're coming after your job. So first, this gentleman, first of all, isn't it interesting they always end up at Shammai first? I don't know why that is. Palifnei Shammai, or maybe the stories when they came to Hillel first, there was never a Shammai and Hillel encounter. So the only time you have the contrast of Shammai and Hillel is if they go to Shammai first. Palifnei Shammai, so this individual went to Shammai. Amar Loi, Gaireni, I want to convert, but I just have a small request. When I finish the program, I'd like to become a high priest. And once again, Shammai used his handy-dandy measuring stick to send this guy flying. I don't know if he literally was violent. I don't think so. But the point was he sent him out very vigorously. Bolifnei Hillel, he came before Hillel, Guy Ray, and he was accepted into the conversion program. Amar Loi, Hillel tells the convert, I know you want to convert, and I'm very excited about giving you a chance to be the high priest. Well, Klum Amidin Melech, Elamishi Odea Taxise Malchus. You don't become a king until you first go through a little bit of a training on how to lead a kingdom. Well, you want to have royalty. Let's teach you a little bit about what it takes to be a high priest, and then we'll see if you still want to do it. Rashi Taxise Tikune Tzorchei HaMelech L'Fei HaKavod. The king needs to know royal etiquette. See, that's interesting. Rashi doesn't say you need to know how to run a country. You just need to know royal etiquette to command respect. So that's an interesting, thing. Come, let's go learn a little bit about the etiquette of how to be a king. Halach v'kara. So together they open the Torah and they start reading the verses that describe what a high priest is and how he does. And kivan shigia, until he comes to the verse in the Torah that says, "Ve'azar hakarev yumat," a non-Kohen who approaches the holy temple in service is put to death, or he dies from heaven. Amar lei. So the prospective convert asks Hillel, "Mikra ze'al minamar," who is considered a non-Kohen? Amar loi. So Hillel cleverly responds, Afilu al David Melech Yisrael. Even King David, the most famous, popular person in Jewish history at that time, David HaMelech, he too cannot become a high priest. So this prospective convert says to himself, again, I may be totally misreading this Gemara. It's possible that he converted already. I'm trying to put the twist that would be familiar to us. Ma Yisrael shenekro banim l'makayim. The Jewish people, again, this makes me think he has not yet converted. The Jewish people are called my firstborn son. And nonetheless, the Torah can refer to them as a foreigner, a non-Kohen. I've just joined the people. I don't have a lot of history. I certainly am also considered a non-Kohen. And so therefore, I probably can't get this position as a high priest. The convert comes back to Shammai. Amrlai, klum royani liyos kayin gadol. You know, and I know that I can't be a high priest. So I get it. I no longer, he's withdrawing his application, or he's amending his application to be a convert, saying, I no longer have this condition. I don't care. It's okay. I don't have to be a high priest. Hillel, he then comes to Hillel and says, Amarlai, Anvason Hillel, your humility, your patience, as Rabbi Steinzel translates, which is probably a better translation for the context. Blessing on your head. So if anyone's ever wondering where that phrase, a blessing on your head, comes from, I don't know if this is the only source, but we certainly have a source for a blessing on your head. Shekeraftani tachas kanfei hashchina. You have brought me under the wings of the Shechina, of Hashem's presence. Liyomim nizdavgu shlashtan l'makam echad. A few years later, they had a yeshiva dinner, and they were all sitting at the same table at the fundraiser. Amru, and he says, Shammai, I respect you, but I got to tell you something. Kaptanusai shel Shammai biksho litordeini min ha'olam. Your impatience, your strictness, your inflexibility almost drew me from my world, the world of Judaism, the world of a relationship with Hashem. And Vasnusai shel Hillel, and Hillel's humility and patience, kiraftani tachas kanfei hashchina, that is what brought me to have a relationship with Hashem notwithstanding, and he helped me remove my original crazy demands. Hillel understands that the person has no frame of reference, he has no background, and Hillel understands that if he's sincere, upon examination, he'll realize that he still wants to be Jewish and he'll drop his demands, and that's what happens. So this is a fantastic, fascinating additional story about Shammai and Hillel and their interaction with a prospective convert. And it's a shame that this story, I mean, I know why it's less popular, because it's a little more complicated, and it's you have a little bit more inside baseball, if you will. But this too is a fascinating story, and the anecdote at the end really drives home what's going on over here. And so this is the third story of a prospective convert, and the treatment and the distinction between how Shammai and Hillel react to the prospective convert. Now, I do want to make an important footnote. I believe this is important. Shammai, in none of these situations, did something wrong. People aren't entitled to come with me and start making demands and being a nudnik. These people, they're not entitled to Shammai's time, and they're certainly not entitled to come and start making demands. So Shammai was correct, but Hillel, in his patience, is able to be more than correct. He's able to have a transformative moment and be transformative in those people's lives. And so I just want to make sure it's not really, I don't think that we're maligning Shammai per se. Everything that he did was 100% halachically acceptable and in accordance to the code of ethics for whatever exactly Shammai's title was. But Hillel went beyond the letter of the law and over the line to look after and to be patient. And that's why Hillel is so celebrated. I suspect that Shammai's reaction may have then been and may still be a more mainstream reaction. Hillel is the anomaly, worthy of celebration and worthy of attempting to emulate. In a moment, we'll give a recap of the Gemara. We'll see if we can squeeze in a few more lines. Any comments or questions before we do that? Doctor, go ahead. You're muted though, so please unmute.
I think one takeaway is that this belies the adage that clothes make the man. So that's number one. The guy just wanted the clothes, he wanted to wear the clothes. But we still haven't come to reconcile that our current Kohen Gadol here, who is only a tourist and a Toshav of Canada, can be the Kohen Gadol of Canada, even if we don't allow him to be the Kohen Gadol here. I just want to make that clear, at least
Alan,
in my mind.
Alan, do you have anything to say in your defense? You've been subtly demoted by our chief lady over here.
Whatever he says is fine with me.
I think
he's a good guy. He means well.
I think we can allow you to be the Kohen Gadol of this virtual kihila.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure.
All right, so let's do a fast recap. And again, if there are any further comments, I think this is one of those segments of the Gemara that deserve a good conversation. All right. So today I would say is part 2 of the story of Shammai and Hillel, and it's part 2 of Hillel, and this chapter is Hillel versus Shammai, or a case study of two different, I'm sure somewhere out there's a thesis studying what we can glean about people converting to Judaism in the 100 years that precedes the destruction of the temple, and much of that I'm sure it would like to focus on this text. So again, 3 stories of prospective converts who approach Shammai Hillel. The first one was, of course, how many Torahs do you have? Shammai says 2, and then the gentleman says, I only accept the written Torah, but I'm not comfortable accepting the whole oral Torah from you. It's not clear if he rejected the existence of an oral Torah or the sanctity of the oral Torah or Shammai's version of the oral Torah, but that is his point. When he goes to Hillel, he does the same thing, and Hillel is ready to convert him, even though it sounds like he is not accepting the oral Torah. And cleverly, Hillel shows him that this person is putting enough faith and trust in Hillel's tradition by virtue of allowing him to teach the Aleph Beis, that it's worthy of accepting the totality of Hillel's teachings, both about the oral Torah and the written Torah, because of course, how the sounds of the letters and the nikudot and the tunes and all those things are oral, and it's part of the oral tradition. And Hillel gets this person on board. Story number 2 is the famous story about teaching the whole Torah on 1 foot. Again, the common interpretation was a fast just teaches me really, really fast. We saw an alternative interpretation that says he wanted one code, one idea that would be the principle or the fundamental upon which he could build his entire Jewish experience. Shammai said that's a crazy request. Either sign up for my program or get out. You don't get to dictate the terms of the program, and that's reasonable. But Hillel tells him this famous comment: that which is hateful to your friend, don't do. That which was hateful to you, don't do to your friend. That's the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go learn. And we had the opportunity to explore Rashi's interpretation of this Gemara, which is very different than the common reading. Again, that your fellow is Hashem, and you shouldn't do things that are hateful to Hashem, which means don't do the Averot, just like you yourself wouldn't like someone to do hateful things to you. And in order to know what Hashem likes and doesn't like, you got to go learn. And we had also, for the professors, important note that typically this story is told without the part that says this is the whole Torah, or the rest is commentary, go learn, making it sound perhaps like the totality of Torah is only interpersonal. Of course, interpersonal is essential and absolutely critical, but you got to know Judaism is a religion ultimately, and Judaism does demand that a person also have a relationship between man and Hashem. The last story is the story of the man who finds out about the wonderful wardrobe of the high priest. He wants to convert so he can have that wardrobe. He asks Shammai if he could enter the program with this condition, and Shammai says, your application is denied. He goes to Hillel, Hillel accepts him, and then begins studying with him, and very cleverly and compassionately and slowly introduces the truth to this man, which is that unfortunately he is never going to be qualified to be a Kohen. But ultimately, the fact that Hillel was ready to take him into his program, even though he had this unreasonable demand, he expresses his own gratitude at the time that Hillel, Shammai, and this gentleman are together. And he also has some sharp words for Shammai, that Shammai's unwillingness to accept him in the program almost kept him outside of Judaism, which based on his words is evidently his whole life, and was something that was very important and very sincere and very true for him. But now I need to tell you that I think I taught you this Gemara wrong. Just one detail. Who are the people that we're getting together? I told you Shammai and Hillel and the last convert, but I didn't look at Rashi. So let me make a small amendment. Rashi says that the people that were at the shul dinner being honored was not Shammai and Hillel, but it was these 3 converts together. And they had a little bit of a therapy session talking about the horror stories from before they converted, and they all together, this makes more sense, but anyways, they all together shared their common experience, which is that they might have not had the privilege of being Jewish had they only signed up at Shammai's program, and it is Hillel's patience that brings them together. So that is the small amendment. Again, I initially explained it that they were sitting with Shammai and Hillel, but it actually makes more sense that the 3 converts of the 3 stories all were sitting together. Maybe it was a therapy session, or I don't know what, and they had that observation and those comments about their teachers. That concludes today's Gemara. It's already 11 o'clock. Very, very interesting and essential stories to understand and get into the minds of how to deal with people that are maybe a little idiosyncratic or make interesting requests. This is certainly a text that as a rabbi, I probably should study even more. And I want to thank you all for being on board and for your feedback, insight. I hope tomorrow you'll join us. Believe it or not, we're going to have one more day, God willing, of this kind of Gemara. And I hope you'll come and I hope you'll enjoy. Again, today's learning, or this month of learning, Lila Nishmas, Chaya, Leah, Basra Binyamin. This week, dedicated for the yahrzeit, which was yesterday, of Daba, Basra Binyamin, Halevi, and Chasya Bastavia, my mother. Yahrzeit was yesterday, and we'll dedicate the remainder of the week, at the very least, for yahrzeit. Praying for good blessings, success, and health and happiness for everyone here and all that belong to you. Family and friends, we should have good news. Ayashri Koyach, thank you all. Sharon, thank you. After any final comments, we're going to end this group this year, and I'll ask you to rejoin to study today's Chumash with Rabbi Shalom there. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeshikach.
Bye.